What's up guys, Bobby here, and a few days ago I put up a unboxing video of the Liftboard dual motor electric skateboard. I said that I would do a follow-up video, and that is what this is. I really wanted to get into kind of the details and my thoughts after having ridden it a handful of times and really go over every aspect that I feel comfortable talking about. This is my first electric skateboard, so I don't really have anything to compare it to, but I have longboarded for the past 10, 15 years. Always enjoyed that. This is quite a bit different, but it is very unique, very awesome. Definitely love it. So let's dive into it. First thing is just the board as a whole. And I'm actually gonna put this down because one of the first things I went over is it's heavy. I don't have the exact weight. There we go. But like I said, it is pretty heavy. It's not something that I would want to lug around, but most of them are heavy. And of course, there is a trade-off in that you get a good top speed, you get some good range. Most of that weight is in the battery. But when I first unboxed it, like I said in that video, it's really sturdy. It feels really well made. So there's a trade-off there. And one of the big things that I love about this, and the thing that really makes that weight not a big issue, is the handle on it. There's a handle almost in the middle of the board. And when I try to carry it like I was just now, or slung around the board with my arm, that was really difficult to carry. But the handle, it's not a big deal at all. I don't feel like it strains my arm or anything like that. So the handle is a huge plus. Absolutely love that. So now I'm gonna go piece by piece. So starting with the deck, like I said, the deck is really solid. I'm actually used to a flexible deck. I rode on a bamboo arbor board forever. That's what I still ride if I'm not riding an electric skateboard, I guess. So that was really flexible. I absolutely loved that, and that's what I'm used to. So this was actually really weird for me to get used to. Having ridden it, a handful of times now, I feel a lot more comfortable on it. And it's not a bad thing, honestly. Like a bamboo super flexible deck at some of these speeds might not be the best thing. So just something to get used to, something to bear in mind for sure. Next up are the wheels, and quite honestly, I don't think these are like amazing wheels, but I don't think they're terrible. They seem just fine. They're pretty large, and I don't have an exact size on them. It might be available on Liftboard's site. If I find it while editing, I'll put it down below. The other thing too is they're brand new, so they feel like super, plasticky kind of, and they're I've ridden it a little bit now, but they're not really worn down or anything yet. As far as like firmness, softness, stuff like that, it feels similar to the wheels that I have on my arbor board, which are just whichever ones they came with. I honestly don't remember what those are either. As far as like, if you try to squeeze it, you get a little bit of give, nothing crazy. So again, I don't really know how to speak specifically to that. Those are just my observations. Kind of the same thing with the trucks. I don't think these are branded trucks. These are like Liftboard. Similar to the wheels, they're Liftboard wheels. That's the only branding I can find on them. Trucks seem fine, seem sturdy. I don't know what to talk about much more than that. Out of the box, I think they are kind of stiff. After having ridden it, being stiff is not that bad. It kind of goes back to the board being sturdy, the trucks being sturdy, because when you are at pretty high speeds, you want that sturdiness. I might loosen them up a little bit, because one problem I was having is even at slow speeds, I didn't love the turning radius. It wasn't that good due to the flex and the trucks not being very loose. So I might loosen them up a little bit, but there's definitely got to be like a sweet spot there where it's still sturdy, you still feel safe, but you can have the turning radius that you want. Then we get into the motors. Now these motors, this one is the dual motor, and they are uncovered, which is, not a bad or a good thing necessarily. On their website, they say they do it because it doesn't trap debris in there. I don't think I've ridden it enough to really attest to the long-term usage of these open belts, but I imagine they tested it and they decided to go this route. Like I said, I've put maybe 8-10 miles on this, and I haven't noticed a ton of debris trapped in there, but that's not a ton of miles, so who knows. So no, I'm actually going to take this out. I really want to do a long ride, get as much info as I could on top speed, average speed, stuff like that. Really get a really good feel to, speak to acceleration, speed, stuff like that as well. So I'm going to take it out and then I'm going to be back. ride. I ended up going 6 miles. I was planning on going until the battery died, but I also didn't really expect the battery to last its advertised range. So this board, just so you have it, it advertises a top speed of 18.6 miles and it advertises a range of 16 miles. Now I am about 120 pounds and what I was riding on was paved sidewalk. It was a bike lane around a lake, but there are a bunch of cracks and stuff. It's not the best kept pathway in the world. Mostly flat for the most part, some slight inclines, slight declines, and there is one decent hill. I don't have the grade, I'm sorry, for that hill, and I went up and down that a few times to get used to that as well. So looking at my screenshot from the ride here, I just want to bring up a few details. Like I said, I went just over 6 miles. Now the duration and the average speed are probably not right. I filmed a lot of this. I was taking some notes. I had to look up something and take a phone call. So I stopped a handful of times. So I wouldn't look at like that average pace or the duration, but I did go 6 miles. My average speed, like it says, was 8.4 miles, but I think it was probably higher than that. And my max speed was 17.1 miles. Those are really the only big things that I would say are relevant in this. I did do an incline a couple times, but I don't have the grade for that, but I will get into that in a minute. So first, let's talk about the speed. Top speed of this board, like I said, in my ride was 17.1. Now they advertise 18.6 miles per hour. I didn't quite hit that. I didn't have any crazy downhills or really crazy uphills. It was mostly flat. It was a pretty windy day, so maybe that plays into it in some way. But getting close to that, 17.1, of course, I'd love to go 18.6 and have a little bit, more speed, more top speed. But at the same time, I feel like that's pretty close. It's close enough for me to feel like their rating is accurate within a level of acceptance to me. And that top speed felt pretty good to me. My first time getting up there, it felt fast. Like it was scary. Like I said, this is my first electric skateboard. I felt in control, but kind of right on that line, which is really where you want to be. You still get that adrenaline rush, but you still feel in control. As I rode more and more, that top speed kind of became more normal to me. But what really still stuck with me is the acceleration, which I want to get into now. And the acceleration was really whatever you wanted. If you wanted to slowly accelerate up, you could do that. And if you wanted to, if you wanted to gun it, you'd probably come off the board. It accelerates really quick. Even when you're already going, maybe 10, 11, 12 miles an hour and you push it up further, it is a very noticeable push, which I love. I love that it accelerates quickly, but also it's under control again. The next thing I want to talk about is the braking. The braking seemed great to me. It was very smooth. It was, again, really whatever you wanted it to be. If you let off the throttle, then you would just coast until you pretty much came to a stop. Similarly though, if you wanted to pull down the throttle to actually brake, you could, as long as you did it smoothly with your finger, it would be smooth on the board. It definitely takes a little bit of getting used to, but overall, definitely happy with it. So ultimately with all of these things, the speed, the braking, the acceleration, what it really came down to was being very in tune with the remote. So what I mean by that is anytime that the board accelerated, a little too fast or braked a little too hard, it was always because I was accelerating too fast. My finger was, slipping or it was kind of hovering. So ultimately, I think that's a good thing. I think it's just getting more and more used to it. Riding it more and more and getting a feel for the remote. So that brings us to the next thing, which is the remote. This was one of the things that I kind of knocked on in my initial unboxing. It feels cheap. It's not like terrible cheap, but compared to how sturdy and well built the board feels, this feels like an afterthought. The main thing is the trigger, which is right here, or the throttle or whatever. This goes up, goes down, and whenever you let go, it goes back to that center position. There are a bunch of indicating lights on the side here. So you have the controller battery level, which is just the bottom light. You have the entire board battery level, which is all 3 of the bottom lights. And then these two lights up here dictate whether you are in beginner mode or fast mode. And then the button up here is for power. It's for switching beginner and fast mode. And you can also switch this board into reverse using this button as well, although I never did that. So then we get to the ride quality, kind of the feel of the ride. To me, it was good overall. It felt more rough than the other longboards I've ridden, which I mentioned were all very flexible, and this one is not. And that pretty much has everything to do with it. I don't really fault this board for that. I could go over a bunch of cracks and some decent sized sticks, not little twigs, of course. I went through some gravel that was on the sidewalk, some rocks here and there, small rocks, of course. And transferring from a sidewalk into the road and then back up onto the sidewalk. It handled all of that really well. Going down the sidewalk and then back up onto a sidewalk is never the most comfortable thing in the world, but I felt in control as long as I was going the right speed for it. So ride quality was great. It's basically what I would expect, I'd say, with a pretty stiff board. But the wheels being bigger, I think, helped a lot. And then the only other thing, like I mentioned earlier in this, is that I wish the trucks were maybe a little looser or there was a little more flex in the board to be able to, carve a little better, to kind of hit turns a little sharper. I didn't love the turning radius that I had. So the last thing that I want to go over before I get into, some other stuff is the range. Like I said, I went 6 miles, just over 6 miles on this ride, and I was still showing 2 of the 3 indicator lights for the battery level. So my guess is that means I was somewhere between 40 and 60%. I think that 16 miles is attainable, or something pretty darn close to it. Whenever I could, I was at full throttle, so I imagine that uses a lot more of the battery. I also went up a decent hill a couple times, which would chew up a bit of the battery. So I think if you were cautious and you were riding, somewhere in the middle speed-wise, and it was flat and you weren't doing uphills, you weren't accelerating or braking a ton or too quickly, I think 16 miles is doable, honestly. Like I said, or something around there. Now with mine being at 6 miles, going pretty much full speed, or at least at the top end of the speed for a good chunk of it, and doing the couple hills and still having, somewhere 40, maybe 50% left, I think that would get you somewhere in the 10, 12, 13 mile range maybe. And I think that's super respectable. It's definitely all that I need. I was really looking for something that could get me maybe 8 miles or so, and this exceeds that. So I'm pretty happy there. So of course, with every review and every product, there are things that can be improved upon. And there were a few things that I think was maybe an oversight, or things that I'd like to see improvement, either in this current model, if they're able to, or in future models. None of them are a super big deal. Overall, I'm incredibly pleased with this board, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I already went over the remote, which I think feels like an afterthought. It works fine. I had no problems with it, although I will mention one confusing thing in a minute here. But it does feel cheap. It does feel like an afterthought. So I think that's something that could be improved upon. I also think that the deck could be improved upon. If you love a sturdy, stiff deck, this is for you. And if you don't want that, it would be nice to have a different option. The other thing that I'm putting in the cons list, and I don't really know what it was, is the remote kind of started beeping at me. It didn't happen until towards the end of what my ride was, but again, I was still showing 2 of 3 battery lights. And I almost want to say it fell in line with when I was slow. Maybe I was coming from the street up onto a sidewalk, and then I would start to accelerate quick. It was almost like there was a threshold that it would beep when I would hit a certain threshold. I could not find anything online about this. There was nothing in the owner's manual. I have no idea what's causing it, and that very well might not be the case. But that's what I felt like. So if I accelerated really fast, I'd get 2 kind of quicker beeps, where if it was slow or slower, I'd get a beep and then another beep. Again, I don't know what this was or what this is. I don't know if it's standard. Maybe it's a problem. Maybe it's not. But I'm putting it in the cons section because I don't know. The one main area of improvement that I think could be worked on, again, is actually with the remote kind of, and that's with the throttle. Now I like the throttle, I got used to it, and I could accelerate more smoothly, decelerate more smoothly, and overall I enjoyed it. I don't have any big complaints. But one thing I noticed is that the top 30% of the throttle doesn't really do anything. And what I mean by that is, if you're in the middle and then you go up another, 45, 60 degrees or something, at that point you've hit top speed. But there's still more room on the throttle to push it up. So it's not really a huge deal. It's certainly not a deal breaker for me. It's just kind of a minor annoyance. And kind of another thing that I feel is like an afterthought or like an oversight. It's weird to be at 70% or, when you're in the middle somewhere in there and you push it up and you get a lot, of speed, and then you're at the 70% mark maybe, and you kind of buckle down and you brace for another little push and nothing comes. The speed stays exactly the same. Now I would put it all the way to the top because it's easier to hold it there, but kind of a weird observance that I had, and something that it would be nice if they paid a little more attention to that and got it in line with the board exactly. I also think that would allow you to accelerate and decelerate probably smoother, as you'd have more range of motion for that throttle. All in all though, those are some really minor complaints. Some of them even preference-wise, they're not like a fact or a problem. I love this board. I think it is so awesome overall, especially for the price point, which is just insane compared to some of its competitors. Of course, its long-term durability is not in question, but it's fairly new, so who knows how it will hold up. But like I said, it's built very well. It seems very sturdy. It doesn't feel like a cheap board that's going to fall apart, so I think it's going to hold up pretty well. I've been really impressed with the top speed, the acceleration, which is quick, the braking, which is smooth, and the range, which seems to be top notch. I've really enjoyed my time on this. I'm super excited to keep riding it. Happy to answer any questions that you guys might have about this board or about anything with this board or my experience with this board. I think that pretty much sums up my thoughts. Again, this is my first electric skateboard, so I may not be as qualified to talk about some of these things, but since I do have a model that I can be hands-on with and ride it and test it and share my thoughts, I wanted to put this video together. Hopefully it helps some of you. Ultimately, I highly recommend this board and would definitely recommend purchasing it if you're in that price range where you want to save a little bit of money, you don't want to top, $700-800, you don't want to go into the upper threshold of electric skateboards.